and it is certainly a pleasure and a privilege to introduce you to Michael Evans. Michael is the president of the Alibaba Group. He was also the vice chairman and a partner at Goldman Sachs for over 20 years in New York. Now, as we are having this Sunday our upcoming annual Oxford-Cambridge boat race, I'll be remiss if I did not mention that Michael rowed for Oxford at the stroke oar. Now, on that note of friendly competition, Michael, if I may kick off.
Sure.
Alibaba is the world's largest mobile commerce company, and certainly in China. And everybody knows about Alibaba. But what do you think it is that people might not quite fully understand about the company?
Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. In terms of Alibaba, I think is well understood by most people in terms of the basic things that we do. So people think e-commerce, they think logistics, they understand a little bit about Ant Financial and payments, and they know we have a cloud business. But what confuses people is when we start talking about things like Hema, which is our offline fresh food and grocery stores, or the fact that we own 51 department stores in China, or that we have an enormous local logistics business, local services business called Ele.me, or that we have a sort of an interesting digital media and entertainment business called Youku, where we make our own entertainment and our own films and TV shows, but we also import content, or that we have a travel business, and so on and so forth. And to a lot of people, that looks like a sort of an eclectic collection of assets that really are not integrated. But if you understand our strategy, which is to provide a lifestyle ecosystem, which is really what we're creating, a place where consumers, the 700 million of them that are on our platform, can go and spend a lot of time, then you start to understand why we have all those assets. And so the average consumer on our platform is spending about 30 minutes a day. And they're not shopping. They're not buying things. They do some of that. But they spend a lot of time in those other areas, both online and offline. So this is very different than what Amazon or eBay looks like. It looks like a little bit of Facebook and Google and Amazon and eBay, all those companies combined. And so it's a very different consumer value proposition, a very different merchant value proposition. I think that's the thing that people just don't really understand. Our size, they get. The other big thing, which is very different, is we're a marketplace. And what that means is we're not a retailer. We don't buy product and resell it. We merely connect the merchant and the consumer. And so many of you in this room understand that because your brands are on our platform. So we don't buy product and resell it. We connect the consumer and the merchant, and we give the data from that's on our platform for that brand to the brand so that they can build their brand and build their customer connection and maintain their brand margin.
Yes, well, speaking for myself, I was very surprised when I had the privilege to see one of your in-house presentations to see how holistic your offerings are and what you offer to the customer and consumer.
If you live in China and you're on this platform, we can't think of a reason why you would leave the platform to go somewhere else. And if there is a reason, then that's probably an area where you will see us strategically focus in the future. So we want to be able to basically provide everything. It's very expensive to build this, and it's very hard to replicate this. But if you can do it in China, which is this massive market that keeps growing, then this is a huge benefit for the customer. And of course, a place where merchants from all over the world, including in China, want to sell their products and build their brands.
Now that leads me to my next question. What is Alibaba's international ambitions? Are you primarily focused on the Chinese market, given its size and potential?
Well, the Chinese market is what I think of as our edge. So those 700 million consumers on our platform, they're buying products not just in China, but from all over the world. And so that is a uniquely valuable opportunity that we have and that we can provide to brands all over the world. So on the one hand, we're canvassing and looking for brands, retailers, small businesses from everywhere in the world, but principally from the biggest and most developed markets. So think North America, Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, because they are producing the best products in the world. And the Chinese consumers want to buy them. And they can see these products, both when they travel, but also through the internet. So we are enabling brands, many of you in this room, to sell those products directly to the Chinese consumer. And that is the most important part of our globalization strategy. And so when you think about all the offices that we've set up around the world, the people in those offices, including here in the UK, are very focused on that aspect of the business. The second thing that we're doing is we are building local consumer businesses because we aspire to serve not just 700 million consumers in China, but 2 billion people around the world. And the largest consumer base in the world is in our backyard. It's in Asia. So you've seen that we bought businesses in Southeast Asia, South Asia, so think Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, countries like that, India. We've made investments in Turkey for local businesses and in Russia. And the aggregate of those populations as an emerging consumer group is about 4.5 billion people. And we think that's the most interesting large group of consumers to focus on today and for the next 20 to 30 years. So those local businesses, you will see us continuing to invest in. And then really the third leg of it is, if you want to have businesses in those markets and you want them all connected, then you need to have enabling services. So we're talking about logistics, secure payments, right, and cloud capabilities so that data can be stored safely and securely, and these businesses can operate in the cloud today and in the future. So it doesn't sound very complicated, but that's really the extent of our international ambition. You won't see us, building a local business here in the UK because there are already lots of local e-commerce players in the UK. And all we would do by coming to this market is we would just cut the pie into smaller pieces, which we don't think serves the consumer well and doesn't serve the merchants or the competitive market well.
So Alibaba's been working on something which I think is a fascinating concept called new retail. And as I understand it, it's bridging the gap between digital and physical retail. Alibaba's also been quite active in the luxury space, as we know. And what I'd like to know, how's this panning out? How's this benefit the customer and the consumer and the retailer?
So new retail first, because this is a little bit confusing because people think, well, new retail is like omni-channel. It's not like omni-channel. And it's not like online and offline combined. When we think about new retail, what we're talking about is digitizing the entire retail value chain. So this is particularly important for merchants. What do we mean by that, digitizing the retail value chain? Everything from the front end, which would be the manufacturing, through the inventory and warehouses and marketing and merchandising and fulfillment and delivery. So if you think about the way that works today, what happens offline is very different than what happens online. And what we're doing is digitizing all of the processes so merchants know where their inventory and where their product is and how to fulfill and deliver much more efficiently. So this is all about optimizing the retail value chain for merchants on the one hand, and also reducing cost and increasing productivity and ultimately bottom line margin. And merchants love this because I'll give you a simple example. Let's say that a customer walks into your offline store and wants to buy a new sweater and has the color but not the size. Now the size will be found in both another store or in the warehouse. The warehouse is 150 miles away. The store is 3 blocks away, another one of your offline stores. Because the inventory isn't digitized and integrated, most merchants don't know whether they should fulfill from the store 3 blocks away or from the warehouse. So why would you spend the money on logistics to fulfill from the warehouse if you could fulfill from the store 3 blocks away? So unless you have an integrated, digitized business, both online and offline, then you can't make that determination. Customer benefits because they get the product in 2 hours instead of 2 days. Merchant benefits because they don't pay the cost for logistics by moving the product 150 miles instead of 3 blocks. So we've now implemented this over the last couple of years in a couple of different categories, in 3C and electronics, in food, fresh food, and groceries, because that's such a big consumer segment. Also we're bringing it to fashion and apparel. It's much more complicated because every brand is different, right? But this is the way of the future, and from our standpoint, it makes sense because now instead of just being an online player and approaching, say, 15% of the total retail market in China, we can approach 100%. And the consumers, of course, they love it because they don't want to understand the technology or the supply chain logistics or the digitization of all of this. All they care about is the convenience of being able to order it on their phone, pick it up in the store, have it delivered, buy it in the store and go to a movie and have dinner and not worry about what's going to happen. It's making it easy for them to shop. So this is the focus, and we believe new retail, which does not yet exist here in Europe, in the UK, or in the US. We think this is a model which is going to become extremely important for brands, retailers, small businesses everywhere in the world.
Next question is, increasingly European and American retailers and brands want to tap into the Chinese market with its potential and size. And we increasingly see this over the last number of years, but in particular last 2 to 3 years. So what do these brands and retailers, and that's the key question, need to know about the Chinese customer to be successful there?
Well, I'll make some general comments and then I'll also focus on luxury. I think the most important thing is that this is a very young, very smart, quite wealthy group of consumers. And I'll give you a few statistics in a minute. And the wealth isn't all self-generated. In many cases, it's family-generated. But they're also very mobile. And by that, I mean not moving around, but they do everything on the mobile phone. They're not particularly brand loyal, but they are brand aware. And they're curious and they study a lot. So they're not, they don't make flash decisions on consumption. They like to understand stories. They are very interested in new brands, but they're also interested in the old brands, or the older brands, the more established brands. But they want to understand the history. So much of what, for example, people are doing in the luxury pavilion in terms of the way that people are building, brands are building their online flagship stores, they're fascinated by the history of brands, how they were established, where they came from, who the founders were, the sort of family lineage in some cases. And they really want to understand that. They also want to try new things, and they don't want to look like everybody else. So I'm not going to mention any brands in particular, but they don't want to be wearing or to be seen to have, whether it's, luxury watches or suits or scarves or handbags or whatever it is. They don't want to be seen to be wearing the same thing as everybody else. So they're very individualistic. On our luxury platform, 50% of the sales that we're making are to people less than 30 years of age. So if you think about that in the context of, say, the UK and the US, that is fully 15 to 20 years younger than the age of luxury consumers in those markets. So these are young people who are buying these purchases. Of all of the luxury shopping that's happening on our platform, it's all taking place between the ages of 18 and 44. But 50% is people under 30. Another measure is 100,000 people last year, 100,000 consumers last year spent more than $160,000 US on our platform on luxury. And it's a curated platform. Of our 700 million consumers, we don't let everybody go to the luxury pavilion because not everybody should go to the luxury pavilion. Look at the offline luxury retail stores, the flagship stores. They don't let everybody into the store. So it's curated, and it's we're very disciplined about who can come and who can look and who's allowed to buy. So that we create something special that is a special place to go and evolve luxury. But today, as you all know, more than a third of luxury is bought by the Chinese, and in the next 5 years, it'll be 50%. So last year alone, Chinese bought $73 billion of luxury products. So we know that that is going to be a huge market in the future. China will be, both between the traveling Chinese tourist and the domestic consumption. So it's going to be very interesting to follow this.
On that note, on luxury, Alibaba, as I know, partners with a lot of luxury and fashion brands of all sizes, and many are in this room today. And the question is, what do Chinese customers want in the luxury space? And how does Alibaba see, how does it fulfill that need?
Well, we look very carefully at two things. The first is, what are the Chinese travelers doing when they travel abroad? Because I think people are a little confused about this, is that most of luxury today that's purchased by Chinese consumers is purchased by those consumers when they're traveling outside of China, not inside of China. And many of the luxury brands, including many of you, have taken a view that you didn't want to be on platforms, or you would have maybe 1 or 2 flagship stores in China offline. But that China, while an important market, was a tricky market, and one where you wanted to understand IPR protection and a variety of other important things. So the Chinese tourist did, or Chinese consumer did what any consumer would do. If you can't buy it in China, buy it outside of China. But when they bought those products, they were almost always using Alipay to pay. And so we could see what they were buying, and we could see what was interesting. And so as we've come and talked to many of you about coming to the Luxury Pavilion and establishing an online flagship store, that's how we know which types of products, which brands the Chinese consumer is most interested in. And so there are all the traditional and you know, the obvious names. But then there are a whole series of younger and smaller and emerging luxury brands, which were also very interesting. So I'll give you one example, Loewe, okay, who came to us and said, we're probably too small to be on your platform, but do you think Chinese consumers would be interested in our product? We said, we'll do a quick pop-up store for you around Chinese Valentine's Day. And why don't you create a product that you think might be interesting? We'll help you through something called Tmall Innovation, which is our innovation lab for helping brands decide how to create products that'll be interesting to Chinese consumers. So they made a little handbag this big with hearts on it. They were all sold within about 5 minutes on the platform. And we said, I think, you know, your brand and this type of product is going to be very interesting to the Chinese consumer. And they've gone from strength to strength since then. So I think that you have to be patient with the Chinese consumer, because not everything that sells well in the UK or the US or in Europe is necessarily going to sell well in China. But they're also very good about telling you what they want. And we're very good at interpreting what we think will work. And so we work very closely with the luxury brands to try and figure that out together.
So that leads me to my next question, which is for brands, but in particular for luxury brands. Intellectual property is strategic in protecting the intellectual property, and you've done enormous amount of interesting digital work on dealing with counterfeits and piracy online, and in particular with using big data analytics and AI. And can you tell us a little more about those developments?
Yeah, you know, Fred, it's a very interesting question, because 4 years ago, when I actually joined Alibaba, this would not have been a group that I would have wanted to address right away. And we definitely had a problem with counterfeits on our platform. And it occurred to me then, but more importantly, it occurred to Jack and to Daniel, our CEO, that if we want to be the leader in this business, both online and offline, then we're going to need to be a leader in IPR and brand protection. And at the time when we told people that, including some or many of you, and people said, yeah, okay, show us. And we were involved in some fairly high profile lawsuits at the time with, fantastic brands. And I was sort of scratched my head and thought, wow, I mean, this is something we need to change. This is something we really need to focus on and to work on. And thank you for mentioning that we've made a lot of progress. We're not done, but we have made a huge amount of progress. So I was talking to the AAFA in Washington 2 weeks ago, to a group very much like this. And that was a group that absolutely hated us 4 years ago. In fact, I remember giving a short remark, and people were very close to throwing things, mostly footwear, at me. And I think that, we realized that one other very important thing, which is if we don't make a big effort on this and we don't show brands, but also small businesses and help retailers, that we are really focused on helping them protect their IP, then it's also going to impact our brand and reputation. And so the work that we did was really to change the thinking internally, not just the international people like me, but all of the domestic people, the people who ran the platforms, which is we have to work on this together as a team. And we have to start to think about new ideas and new ways of approaching this. So out of nowhere came, of course, all the obvious stuff, the notice and takedown and all the things that we should have been doing, but also things like our Alibaba Anti-Counterfeiting Alliance, which is now up to about 170 brands, where we work with those brands very, very closely to deal with counterfeits on the platform and offline. Because, of course, all these counterfeits are produced offline, not online. So I think that we feel we've done a lot. We think we've done a lot, made a lot of progress. There's more to do. And one of the things Fred and I were talking about earlier is what's next? What's the next big step? Because we very much feel like we're leading globally on this issue, but we know we're not done. And I've got some meetings this afternoon in Paris where this is going to be discussed with brands specifically. And, this is how I spend 25-30% of my time. Not giving speeches or talking to groups like this, but meeting with individual brands, understanding the concerns, trying to figure out how we can do things better, and then changing the policies internally and the approach internally to make sure we can address these concerns. We are applying huge amounts of technology to this because we are surveilling 2.5 billion products on our platform 24/7. So it isn't about a couple of guys or gals with green eye shades and pencils behind their ears who are going through and looking for things. But all of the artificial intelligence and machine learning is now being applied to exact product. We have a weekend, for example, for a handbag. We have 27 different markers to determine whether a product is real or fake. And it's being screened by machines the entire time as it surveils the platform. If it's a fake, if it fails in one of 27, boom, product gets taken down. There isn't any judgment around it. It just gets taken down. Now, the machines will not be perfect, but when you're surveilling a platform of that size with that many products, we need to be able to, on the one hand, tell you that it's safe for you to be on our platform and that there won't be counterfeits, but we also have to have the physical and the technology capacity and capability to remove products quickly. So I think there'll be more advances in technology, particularly in terms of the imaging process, where we can identify products very, very quickly and take them down. I think that's going to be an important next step to protecting your IPR and keeping fakes off the platform. But these counterfeiters are very sophisticated, and they make products that are, of course, fakes, but they can sometimes be very, very difficult to determine, even for the brands. So working very, very collaboratively and closely with the brands is, I think, the most important thing we do, because we are not experts in your products, but you are. So working together, we'll figure out how to get substantially all of them off the platform.
So we do have, I'm very happy to say, a little bit of time left for Q&A. So any questions for Michael? Yes.
Hi, Michael. My name's Cynthia Brown. I'm a senior lawyer who has been doing finance, legal funds and corporates. I was wondering, in your business, are you buying existing companies that have the technology? Are you licensing it in? being increased by inorganic growth or from within?
So it's an interesting question. And just so people who couldn't hear it, the question is, as we buy companies or as we continue to build the business organically or through acquisition, are we rebuilding their platforms? Are we giving them our technology? How are we dealing with this? And we basically re-platform everything we buy. And we bought businesses in Southeast Asia, so Lazada. We bought a very nice business in the 5 countries of South Asia called Daraz. We have a business in India. We bought a business in Turkey. And all of them, we've re-platformed them. And what does that mean? It means that we've taken their existing platform, which was okay, and we've put our platform, our Taobao Tmall platform, in its place. What that allows us to do is 2 very important things. Number 1 is integrate the platforms. So, give them great technology and great platforms. But number 2, to the extent that we are surveilling, and as we do, and implementing all of our anti-counterfeiting technologies and capabilities, we don't have to spend months, maybe even years, trying to figure out how to integrate those into new platforms. It's all one platform that's completely integrated. So we can surveil just as quickly in Turkey or Singapore or Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, as we can in China. And that is that's a huge commitment of technology, particularly product and tech engineering resources. But it's absolutely essential because we don't want independent platforms that are sitting out there. We want one seamless platform because as we change things, we want those tech applications to be spread across everything that we own.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Chris Desai from Hawaii. Just a quick question. You know that you're saying you're working with luxury brands and you're looking to be a leader, obviously, within the marketplace and the industry. I think one of the next things, would you ever consider doing something that would help drive sustainability within brands? So, for instance, you said you was digitalization for the whole supply chain. Would you ever do something where it would force brands to comply with certain standards that before it actually gets put onto your marketplace, therefore helping them drive sustainability because they can't trade unless they do it? Would that be an option?
Well, I'm not quite sure what that means, but let me back up and say that when brands come on our platform, there are conditions, right? So there are platform conditions that all brands have to comply with. But we don't force brands to do anything, partly because we're not a retailer. So we don't use the stick of we're buying your product, therefore you need to do this. But also, as a platform, we're an open platform. So if a brand wants to come on to our platform and say, sell their products at a 20% premium because they think they can, that's their decision. If a brand wants to come on our platform and sell their products at a 20% discount, or forget about price, if they want to curate only 5 or 6 products out of an assortment of 100, they can do whatever they want because it's their flagship store and it's their direct-to-consumer relationship. It's not ours. So we are a facilitator. Where I think we want to go in the future, particularly as it relates to IPR protection and sustainability, is to continually evaluate what things should we be doing differently or asking brands to do differently that are in the best interest of brands and consumers for the local market. And in that respect, we rely on brands to tell us what they think, but we also rely on the consumers because the consumers are very active in terms of giving us feedback about their experience on the platform. So we have an entire office, part of our infrastructure, that deals with consumer complaints, but also consumer reactions, which we're monitoring continuously. And so the way that that's likely to happen is that we will listen carefully to what consumers are saying and go back and say, for brands on our platform, you need to now comply with these requirements. But none of them are particularly onerous. And I want to finish where I started on this, is we do not tell brands what to do. Brands decide what they want to do on our platform in China.
Thank you, Michael. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and Michael has to catch a plane to Paris. But on behalf of the Luxury Law Summit, allow me to thank you very much for the privilege of having you here today amidst an extremely busy schedule, but also in sharing with us in such depth the larger background to what you're doing at Alibaba. And in particular, I think not only for the geeks, but also for those in the luxury goods space, what you've done in the last 3 years with you and your team in bringing technology to assist in this space has been absolutely enormously helpful to all of us and set new standards. And thank you very much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Fred. Let's appreciate it.